What's up everyone, my name is Jonathan and welcome to the Mid-School Sessions. Today we're going to be looking at how to set up an Odyssey Gyro, as well as exploring some techniques on how to get the best performance out of it. I'm going to be using a first generation Odyssey Gyro for this how-to, but the principles we use can be applied to any gyro available today. So if you're going to be building or restoring an old school or mid-school BMX, or setting up any BMX for that matter, and want to get the best performance out of a gyro, hopefully this guide helps. There are two things that kill gyro performance more than anything else, and they are flex and drag. A lot of what I'm going to show you here are tips that I use to try and reduce this as much as possible. If you are using survivor cables like I am, it's really important that you check them for issues and repair those issues before you start the installation. This will make the job a whole lot easier further down the line. First of all, I check all the barrel adjusters and cable ends for fraying. I also like to check the connectors to make sure that where the cables come in and out of the connector, that they have no kinks or issues. It's also really important that you check the housing for damage. Even a relatively small kink like this one in the outer housing can cause a lot of drag in the system. Taking the time to bend all of these back out will really help the performance. One of the last things you want to check for is pinching and fraying on the lower cable end. At this point it's really easy to fix, but if you leave it and one of the frayed ends catches inside your new outer housing, the whole cable can be ruined. After repairing any issues that you come across, the next step is to thoroughly lubricate the cables. I use an all-weather chain lube, but any general purpose oil will do. This is a really important step of the process. It can be fiddly, but it's well worth doing as it completely transforms the performance of the gyro. So with your cables prepped and ready to go, it's time to start the installation. When building gyros, you always start from the bottom and work your way up. So we're beginning with the lower cable, installing it into the frame and screwing it into the lower gyro plate. When installing the lower gyro cable, I like to make sure that the barrel adjusters sit flush with the top of the lower gyro plate. This ensures your gyro has the maximum amount of travel and gives it the best possible performance. With the cable now installed, we're going to set the length. To reduce drag, you want to ensure that the cable comes straight out of the barrel adjuster and then has a nice natural curve back up to the frame. Once you've found the sweet spot, use a cable tie to lock it in place while you continue with the rest of the installation. Now is also a good time to set your brake pad position. Without any cable tension, it's much easier to get them set up exactly how you like them, and once they're set up, it means installing the brake cable leaves fewer adjustments further down the line. Setting the cable length at the rear is just as important as the front. Once again, you want a nice natural bend with the cable going straight into the barrel adjuster. Too big a curve will increase the drag, as will too shallow a curve into the barrel adjuster. Once you've found the sweet spot, you want to mark that up, pull the housing clear of the inner, and then clip the cable. A step that's often overlooked is opening up the housing again. You can just ram the inner back through the housing, but doing it this way ensures there's no unnecessary drag. Also, don't forget your cable ends. They play a really important part in reducing flex in the housing. The final step in setting up the lower part of the gyro is attaching the cable to the rear caliper. If you've followed all the steps up to this point, this should be pretty straightforward. All you have to do now is feed your cable through and attach it to the cable bolt. Using one hand to compress the caliper and hold the brake blocks tight against the rim, you want to make sure that your cable is seated properly. Then you're going to just nip up the bolt. After that, you can adjust any brake pad gap with the barrel adjuster if you need to. With the lower half of the gyro complete, we now move on to the upper section. Start by screwing the barrel adjusters of the top cable into the gyro plate. Just like before, we want to ensure that the bottom of the barrel adjuster is flush with the bottom of the gyro plate, ensuring the maximum amount of movement for the gyro. Now we are going to select the ideal length for the upper cable. After feeding it under the crossbar, we're going to gently lean it over towards our brake lever. With the cable laying over the lever in this natural position, we can see that the stock length cable is not ideal for the setup we are running. If we push it back, you can see that it bends too much, causing drag. So we need to modify this cable so that it sits in its most natural position, going straight into the lever's barrel adjuster. To do this, we're going to use a knob. You've probably thrown loads of these things away over the years, but they're amazing for getting gyros dialed in. When marking up where you're going to cut the housing, keep in mind that the cable sits midway in the barrel adjuster. Start by clipping off the cable end and then removing the outer housing. Locate where you marked up and trim the housing to length. Just like the lower cable, you want to open up the housing where you clipped it as well as fit a cable in before you carry on. Refit the housing and then lay the cable back across the lever in its natural position. Holding the housing where it would seat in the barrel adjuster, mark up where the cable end would fit into the lever. When doing this, you need to make sure that your cables are properly seated, otherwise this marking will be in the wrong place. Slide the knob onto the cable and then seat it where it would fit into the lever. I like to do this just to make sure it's sitting at the right angle before I tighten everything down. When you're happy that everything's sitting as it should, go ahead and tighten up the cable. You'll notice that after fitting the knob, the cable has a kink in it. At this point you're going to want to straighten that out, as if you don't, it'll cause a lot of drag in the lever. The final step is trimming off the excess cable. I like to use my rotary tool as it's quick and easy and gets it to sit nice and flush, but you can use any tool of your choice that gets the job done. Refitting the cable into the lever is super straightforward. I like to put a bit of grease on the cable end just to make sure that everything can move freely in the lever. And after getting it all seated, you are ready for final setup. With the gyro fully assembled, we're now going to correct any gyro flop that is taking place. As you can see, when you spin the bars, sometimes the gyro will rock forwards and backwards. It's really easy to fix. All you do is start screwing in one of the top barrel adjusters. If it makes the flop worse, screw it back out and start on the other side. Screw the barrel adjuster in a couple of turns and then check. Keep going until the flop is completely eliminated. When it's gone, you know the cable tension's balanced and you're good to go. To prevent the flop coming back, you now want to nip up all of the locking nuts on your barrel adjusters. This will keep everything in place and keep the gyro running smoothly. To get the most out of your gyro's performance, you now want to balance your rear caliper. I'm of course working on a caliper brake, but if you are building a bike with a 990, this is the point at which you'd balance each of the springs. Placing a cone spanner on the rear spindle, adjust the angle of the brake until the brake blocks hit simultaneously. When you're happy that you found the right spot, tighten up the rear bolt and you're all done. With your gyro now fully assembled, all that's left to do is double check the torque of all your bolts, fit your cable ferrule, and you should have a gyro that works as good as it possibly can. Setting up the front brake is no different to any other straight cable setup. One tip that is worth mentioning is that when your cable exits the steer tube, you want to make sure that it exits on the same side of the brake spindle bolt as your caliper arms. If it exits on the far side, it has to make a really sharp bend back across the fork, and this causes a lot of friction in the system. Other than that, all the principles around getting the best performance remain exactly the same. You want to make sure that your cables are clean, they're properly lubricated, none of the bends are excessively tight or shallow, and that of course everything is balanced and tensioned up exactly as it should be. The reality is there's no reason why early gyros have to be poorly performing. Hopefully you can follow these steps, and there's a few takeaways here that you can use to help you reduce the flex and drag in your gyro system, leaving you with brakes that work amazing and do the rest of your build justice.